Just when you thought Gotham couldn't get any stranger, psychologist Schiller arrived, not as a hero, but as a scalpel for the soul. He bypassed a young Bruce Wayne's trauma to validate his darkness, giving the future Dark Knight the permission he craved. Now, ripped into the Marvel Universe, his first client is a post-staff, Afghanistan Tony Stark, a man actively imploding from PTSD. Schiller's opening gambit wasn't empathy, it was a power move. By demanding $1 million an hour fee, he shattered Stark's defenses before going for the jugular, exposing Tony's profound fear of death and the unresolved wounds left by his father. The session left Stark in a rage, SHIELD, scrambling for intel on this mysterious therapist, and Schiller with a new asset. After goading Peter Parker into his fateful spider bite, Schiller has now copied the boy's spider sense. His next move is to intercept the Parker family before tragedy can strike, pulling another hero's strings before they're even sewn. The chessboard has changed, but the Grandmaster remains the same. He was awake. Schiller didn't need to turn over to know it. The familiar scent in the air, a mixture of kerosene and damp, and the perpetual lead, gray sky outside the window were a silent declaration. He was back in the ever-charming Gotham City. Not a minute had passed. He reached out and silenced the alarm clock, his gaze sweeping over the calendar. The date was the day after he had crossed over to the Marvel Universe. The conclusion was clear. While he traveled in the other world, time in this one remained static. Schiller let out a soft sigh. For a moment, he found it difficult to judge which was the more dangerous proposition: the city of sin, Gotham, or the eye of the cosmic storm, New York. Objectively, life in New York was undoubtedly more comfortable, but Gotham, this was his temporary home. At least it hadn't yet triggered any planet, destroying cosmic events. Faced with the purple-chinned madman who could erase half the universe with a snap of his fingers, Schiller knew he stood no chance. He rose and dressed meticulously. Gotham University had a rigid dress code for its faculty. A full suit was a daily necessity. A shirt, a vest, a blazer, occasionally accented with a stylish trench coat. In September, Gotham, being a coastal city, had a relatively mild climate. A slight breeze swept through, dispersing some of the gloom and chill. However, the moment he opened his apartment door, the one person he least wanted to see appeared directly in his line of sight: Bruce Wayne. Without a moment's hesitation, Schiller turned to go back inside. Professor, please wait." Bruce's urgent voice pursued him. "I have some questions about psychology I'd like to ask you." Schiller cursed under his breath. At this hour, several colleagues were passing by the faculty apartments. He couldn't afford a scene. He stopped, turned with a professional smile fixed on his face, but his tone betrayed a sharp edge of impatience. "All right, Mr. Wayne, I can hear you. Let's talk in my office." Inside the office, Bruce did not take a seat. Instead, he brewed a cup of coffee for Schiller, placing the steaming ceramic mug gently on the desk. His movements were impeccable. Then he began, his voice steady and clear, as if reciting a dossier. Schiller Andel Rudolph, World, class criminal psychologist, holder of 4 doctorates in psychology, related fields. You were deeply involved in several sensational national cases, including the Keystone City bloodbath, the Imperial City Red Glove killings, and the Coast City dismemberment case. But the most critical point is this: 4 months ago, you resigned midway through the Metropolis deputy mayor's trial to accept a position at Gotham University. Bruce's gaze was as sharp as a hawk's, piercing straight into Schiller's eyes. Professor Schiller, can you tell me why, of all places, you chose to come to Gotham? The litany of case files was deeply unsettling. Good heavens, he thought, the original owner's resume is a one-way ticket to Arkham Asylum. It makes the Joker's rap sheet look pedestrian, and Bruce has likely only listed the highlights. Though a storm raged in his mind, Schiller's expression remained impassive. He lifted the coffee cup and took a light sip. The scalding liquid slid down his throat, bringing a sliver of calm. He set the cup down with a crisp click and spoke slowly. Gotham is a good place. Is it? A city with the highest crime rate in America. Bruce's voice was filled with undisguised skepticism. That's not important. Oh. Schiller leaned forward slightly, his gaze dissecting the young man before him like a scalpel. Metropolis's crime rate is indeed low. Sit down, Mr. Wayne. In your eyes, Metropolis is safer than Gotham, correct? Is it not? Not for me, Schiller stated calmly. He had inherited the original owner's knowledge and abilities, but crucial parts of his memory were missing. He could vaguely sense the shadows of those horrific cases, but couldn't recall specific details. He was certain the original Schiller had been embroiled in some lethal conspiracy, and had been betrayed because of it. The safety you perceive is merely a surface-level illusion, Mr. Wayne. Schiller's voice was low and magnetic. Beneath its bright and glamorous facade, Metropolis hides a darkness you can't begin to imagine. So you chose Gotham. I believe the resume you reviewed was not detailed enough. I have made too many enemies. This is the only place that can serve as my sanctuary. Why? A cryptic smile touched the corners of Schiller's lips. He enunciated each word with chilling precision. Because the only thing that can deal with a criminal is another criminal. The sentence struck Bruce Wayne with the force of a physical blow. He was deeply shaken, subconsciously repeating the words, "The only thing that can deal with a criminal is another criminal. Professor, is that your creed?" "Bruce, let's change the subject," Schiller interrupted suddenly. Bruce's eyes instantly turned grim, like Gotham's eternal storm clouds. In that moment, Schiller realized he was no longer facing Bruce Wayne, the playboy facade, but the vigilante who walked in darkness, Batman. A paranoid, complex genius, separated from madness by the thinnest of lines. "If you want to get more from me," Schiller's tone became frigid, "you will have to pay an equal price." "What do you want?" Bruce asked in a low voice. "What I want, you can't give me right now. I think you understand. So, I can give it to you later." "Of course." Bruce schooled his features, making his thoughts impossible to read. He said abruptly, "Professor Schiller, it's a pity. I added something of my own creation to that coffee, a nanovirus." Schiller let out a soft chuckle, laced with the disdain an adult has for a child's prank. "Bruce, dishonesty will not endear you to me. Such juvenile tricks are entirely useless against me." Bruce was silent for a moment, then stood. "It seems my visit today was for nothing." "Not necessarily," Schiller said, stopping him. "I hope that by the final exam you can present me with an exemplary grade. Use it to prove you have the determination and talent to learn this skill. Then you can come find me. I won't waste any more time here." Bruce's voice was as hard as iron. "You are far from qualified to be a teacher, Bruce. Right now, you're just a student. I have mastered knowledge from all over the world, hundreds of fighting styles. I'm an expert in investigation, lock, picking, counter, surveillance. Everything but one thing." Schiller cut him off, his gaze as deep as an abyss. "You still haven't learned Gotham." Bruce fell completely silent. Schiller saw it clearly. The man before him was not yet the mature Dark Knight. The flames of vengeance burned in his heart, but he was still naive about Gotham, this hell of human nature. He was desperate to use any power he could, including this mysterious psychology professor. The true Batman was a near-demonic intellect, cautious and meticulous, a mortal who stood shoulder with gods. But his strength came from fully donning the suit, transforming himself into a totem of fear, and shouldering the burden of Gotham and all its sins. Right now, Bruce Wayne was not Batman. He still had weaknesses. Schiller felt a sudden sense of relief. If he were facing the fully realized Dark Knight, all his psychological games would be utterly useless. After Bruce left, Schiller stood by the window for a long time. He knew the birth of Batman was imminent. The next day, Schiller taught his class as usual. It was the first psychology lecture for the freshmen. Unfortunately, his attempts to prevent Bruce from taking the course had failed. The young, future Batman sat stubbornly in the classroom, a silent sentinel signaling the end of his peaceful life. Schiller keenly noticed that Bruce's right foot seemed to be injured. He walked with a barely perceptible limp, yet still insisted on attending class. While lecturing on Freud, Schiller's mind wandered. Could the Wayne heir, a multi-billionaire and one of Gotham's most elite scions, have actually been beaten up by common street thugs? After class, Schiller ignored Bruce's clear "we need to talk" signal, quickly packed his books and notes, and blended into the stream of students to make a swift exit. Night fell. If Gotham was hell by day, then by night, it was a place that would make Satan himself tremble. Schiller left the safety of the university district and stepped into the depths of the city of sin. His target was Jonathan Crane, the future Scarecrow. At this point, Jonathan was not yet the fearsome supervillain, but his research into fear had already begun. Schiller wasn't acting out of a sense of justice. His purpose was purely self-preservation. He needed to acquire some fear toxin. In a city of madmen, stealing from another non-combatant's lab was far safer than provoking burly mobsters. Tonight, it was raining again in Gotham. The night was as black as ink, the rain thick with the heavy smell of kerosene. The cold September rain could seep the chill straight to your bones. Schiller, wearing a long black trench coat and holding a black umbrella, moved through the narrow streets. He had already located where Crane hid the toxin, the basement of an abandoned church. Just as he neared his target, his heart suddenly clenched. A fatal sense of crisis shot through him like an electric current. An image flashed in his mind, himself, struck by a projectile. Thump! Almost at the exact instant the premonition hit, Schiller spun around, snapping his umbrella open. Two metal projectiles slammed into the tough fabric of the umbrella with a dull thud, falling harmlessly to the ground. His spider sense had just saved his life. Schiller slowly lowered the umbrella, his face terrifyingly grim, a stark contrast to his mild-mannered daytime persona. His eyes now held the cold, killing intent left behind by a brush with death. At the end of the alley, a tall, dark figure stood silently. Bruce Wayne, or rather Batman, was staring in shock at the scene before him. His meticulously calculated, high-speed batarangs had been blocked in an instant, with an almost precognitive defense. The rain-slicked black umbrella was lowered, revealing a face he knew all too well. It was his university professor, Schiller. And yet it wasn't. The Schiller of this moment possessed a completely different aura from the man he knew. This was the figure Bruce had read about in the files, a madman obsessed with the psychology of crime. Schiller took a deep breath of the cold air and spoke. You are well aware of what would have happened if I hadn't blocked those. The darts would have stopped 30 centimeters from your body. Batman's voice, distorted by a modulator, was low and gravelly. Schiller's gaze swept over him. The suit was crude, lacking the iconic cape and multi-functional belt, and the batarangs were clumsily crafted. Clearly, this fledgling vigilante was not having an easy time in the crucible that was Gotham. Schiller said coldly, "I should remind you, Mr. Bat, unlike the wealthy district you inhabit, the rooftops in the Monson district lack safety railings. If you were to accidentally fall again, it could lead to ruptured organs." The dark figure opposite him visibly stiffened. He asked in a low voice, "How did you know?" "You're too green, Mr. Hero." Schiller's eyes landed on the only exposed part of Bruce's face, his chin. "The topical anesthetic on your leg is almost odorless, a high-end chemical agent not affordable for the wretches in these slums, and—" a sneer crossed his lips. "No one here shaves with such perfect symmetry." "Who are you?" Batman demanded. Schiller opened his umbrella again and turned to leave. He threw a line over his shoulder, like an impatient mentor chiding a disappointing student. "Go home, rich boy. No one is obligated to answer your every question. I am not your private tutor." With that, he vanished into the rain, swept darkness. Batman stood in place for a long time before limping out of the alley. He turned onto another street and saw a homeless woman shivering in the rain. He pulled out a wad of cash and handed it to her. Just then, a voice that made the hairs on his neck stand up sounded from behind, accompanied by the steady tread of leather shoes through puddles. "This is why I say you don't understand Gotham, Bruce." Batman whipped around to see Schiller standing at a nearby intersection. Schiller walked over slowly, took the black umbrella from his hand, and gave it to the woman. She took the umbrella and opened it, shielding herself from the cold rain. Then, trembling, she handed the wad of dollars back to Batman. "Why?" Batman took the money, his voice filled with absurdity and confusion. "Because this is the sewer gang's territory," Schiller explained calmly. "If they found out she had this much money, her body would turn up in a drainage ditch by morning." "This much money?" Batman's voice was incredulous. $37. "Yes." Schiller's gaze drifted toward the end of the street, where a deeper darkness lay. His voice, uncannily clear in the rainy night, sounded like a final judgment. "This is Gotham. Welcome to Gotham.